This is The Prayer, a novel by Maria Schaff. It was a warm summer night in Rome when Luna was born. Rufus stood in the middle of the cold, hard-packed dirt floor, while his mother screamed in agony. This couldn't be normal. Something had to be wrong. If only Rufus knew something. Of course he couldn't. He knew nothing of childbirth. There was nothing he could do. Absolutely nothing. Usually one would have some help when she was giving birth. The father, a grandmother, a nurse. But 13-year-old Rufus was his mother's only companion as she went into labor among dusty finery, left behind from a time when their ancestors were wealthy. Idiot. He was such an idiot. He never felt so helpless in his entire life. Not when he was a little boy. Not even when he watched his mother lose daughter after daughter. Finally, the glass ball that surrounded Rufus's house was shattered by a high-pitched cry. The baby. The baby was fine. His mother was fine. It was all over. Just like that. It seemed impossible for this blind panic to be simply over. For the dust to settle so impossibly fast. His mother was cradling her tiny baby, tears in her mahogany eyes. The baby was so feeble, naked, wet, and helpless. He smiled and looked up, but his mother wasn't happy. Rufus, is it the boy? She hadn't checked. She'd been afraid to. Of course she was. If it was a girl, his father would do to her as he'd done to all of Rufus's sisters. That was, he'd leave her outside, alone to die. Rufus knew why. His father had obsessively told the tale, night after night, how he worked so hard to be the best soldier there could be. He came to command a century of men who cared not for war, but only for themselves, lazy men who would not heed a commander, no matter how hard he beat them. Then came his first battle as commander. It was Germanics, wild men who fight with arrows. His century couldn't have put any effort into the training, of course, even as Rufus's father had squeezed effort out of them like bitter, thick juice from a dried-up fig, picked and left in the sun long before it was ripe. He was in the front of the battle, and he was crippled by an arrow. In fact, he'd gone into sickening detail, how it was severed the tendon at the back of his leg, just behind the knee. How instead of bleeding, it sprayed blood. It had been left him with a leg nearly dragged as he leaned on a stick. That and a motto: if I can't fight for my country, all of my children will. Rufus means red. It had been made clear to Rufus that his name was the color of blood pouring out of enemies slain. Many things are red. Shimmering rubies in the morning light, thick warm clay that the farmer breaks as he toils, a white, ripe, fresh, crisp apple, or a sweet berry, the flickering red light of a fire perhaps, but he knew his name was blood red. It was somewhat normal for Roman men to leave their unwanted baby girls in the elements, but it was a practice that Rufus had come to hate with a passion, not like fire, but like boiling water. Rufus's mother had 11 girls after Rufus was born. His father had left them all out to die. Rufus picked up the tiny baby. It was a girl. Ophelia. Mater let out a long, exhausted, heartbreaking sigh. When she found out that she was pregnant, she had gone to the temple of Devera every day, begging her, the goddess of childbirth, that the baby would be a boy. Perhaps the gods were cruel. Rufus's father at that moment limped into the room from outside. Even with his awkward step, he was an imposing figure. Rufus dipped his head. Pater! His father ignored him. A boy? She shook her head. Ophelia. His father cleared his throat. I have no use for Ophelia. Mater glared at him, but said nothing. Give me the child. Tears in her mahogany eyes. Rufus's mother resisted a little before giving her daughter up. Rufus wished he were a little bigger, then he could fight his father. Pater limped out the door, leaving Mater sobbing in her rags. Rufus's own eyes felt hot and wet. Every muscle in his body was tense. Rufus sat by Mater and hugged her. I'm so sorry. Suddenly Rufus felt compelled to follow his father. It was stupid, he knew. He could do nothing to save the baby. Part of him wondered if he should even want to. I'll be back soon. His mother looked at him through tears. Why? Rufus couldn't really explain it. He just felt he compelled to go. It was a warm night, but not a clear one. The clouds were like blanket, keeping out the cold, but also the light. He crept through the stone streets as he followed his father, tracking his movements, just as if his father were a deer he was hunting. He eventually lost him, but he found the baby. She was alone by the time he found her. She was in a bush in the border of the town, a short walk from where he stood. Her shrill cries were heartbreaking. He started towards the bush to comfort her, something. But when he saw a small silhouette running towards the cry of the baby, a person, it was a person. A person scooped up the baby. Hey, it's all right. You'll be all right. The voice was young and feminine. She looked around and started to run, startlingly fast. Rufus started after her. He had no intentions of taking the baby from her. What good would that be? But he wanted to see where he took her. Who was this strange Philia who rescued babies by night? Curiosity ran through the marrow of his bones. He didn't want to understand what was going on. He had to. Suddenly, Rufus was on the ground. His foot was burning with pain. He tripped on a rock and cut his foot. Curse this darkness. Rufus jumped up and ran with a limp. Every step was agonizing, but there was no giving up now. The girl nimbly jumped on an animal's back. It was a donkey or a horse or a mule or something. The animal was pulling a cart, so Rufus climbed in as fast as he could as it began to move. At first, it was a slow walk, but gradually the cart began to gain in speed until the animal was at a full run, and Rufus had to hold on tight to avoid flying out of the cart. Rufus didn't know how long it was until the cart stopped. It seemed like a long time. He didn't know it was getting cold out. It's too dark to see anything. He took a deep breath. It's fine, I'll just stay here until the sun rises. Then I can check on my sister, and then I can tell Mater the good news. It was suddenly very chilly. The cart jerked as the horse was unhooked and trotted off. There was some burlap sacks on the corner of the cart. Perhaps it could serve as a blanket? Rufus huddled in the corner of the sacks. This was better. He was not going to sleep. He would not. He had to stay vigilant. Well, maybe he'd just take a quick nap. End of chapter 1 of The Prayer.